award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. Once again, we have Mr. Jason Holland in the house.
Jason. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Secrets with the Holland.
Yeah.
They're going to be secrets not much longer. Bearing my soul on this show.
What lake was that where you should tell them about something?
No, we're not going to talk. No, what are you?
I thought we would get a special secret in this show.
I showed them one secret off the air about a lake that's been on fire, and then now we're going to publicize it to the world.
I won't say it if you won't.
I won't say it. We'll keep our secret.
It's in Tennessee.
It is.
It's a good place to be. What's going around?
I mean,
okay.
We're going to start rapping now?
Don's our vocalist here. Don, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Great.
I like that hat you're wearing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's right directly from the GoOutdoorsTennessee.com store. And,
Yeah.
Man, I tell you what, the product is flying off the shelves, and again, a shout out to Cindy for fulfilling the orders, and it's working. You know, We're seeing them out in the world, and the one I am wearing is the Navy Hyper Cool hat.
Yeah.
Jennifer sent me a note and said, "Hey, pick me up some of those. We're gonna make the commissioners a little gift at the last meeting," and she said, "Pick up the Navy Hyper Cool hat." And I thought that was just an adjective, you know, but that's the actual name of the thing.
Those are hyper cool.
Yeah, hyper cool. Yeah.
Well, I need one. I need to look hyper cool. The only way I can be cool is if I actually have on the hyper cool hat.
Well, we got you a cool Tennessee Wildcast.
You got me a Wildcast.
We're working on the logo now.
Slowly but surely, individuals, I'm going to have a logoed Wildcast or at least TWRA button down. One day.
Maybe.
One day.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is
you
what,
know,
six shows. Six.
Yeah.
So what's the lucky number? Is it 7, 8,
I don't know.
12?
This is episode 240 something, I think. But
Maybe.
it took me a long time to get a shirt.
Gonna be a while, people. Gonna be a while. What I'm gonna have to do is take my own shirt and get someone else to put it on there, and then maybe one day we'll get 290 shows. I'll get my shirt.
We'll get you an iron-on patch.
But the hat looks really good on you, Jay.
It does look good.
Yeah.
I actually shot some videos on my own personal stuff. Jason Holland Fishing, shameless plug right there.
There you go.
But actually, I had a Wildcast hat on.
I like that.
And had several people on social media mention it, so
Good.
I'm not representing.
They said, "What's that? How can I hear that?" You can hear that on 20 stations across the state.
That's
here in
right.
Tennessee.
Newest one in Tullahoma, I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guy. Actually, last show we talked about Tim's Ford quite a bit. One of my favorite fisheries.
Yes.
So hey, that lined up perfect. Didn't even have to shamelessly plug that one. That naturally happened. So that was it's nice when a plan comes together.
Yeah. So I wanted to plug that though, and just let everybody know 20 stations across the state. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's growing. So check out our website, tnwildlife.org, and follow the buttons to the Tennessee Wildcast page, and you can see that list and find a station near you.
Good deal.
So
And you get to see 6 episodes of me, which is the only reason why you would go there.
Well,
but I'm personal.
how do you watch radio?
Well, touche. Thank
On
God.
the page you can
On
watch.
the page.
Yes,
That's
on the page.
That's
Okay.
thanks. Todd, you didn't bail me out. Jeez, it's a great time for you to have a mic and help me out there. Nope, I just in the background.
All right. Well, go to our store, check out the products. Go to our website, check out where you can find Wildcast and all the other stuff, the great stuff we have on our website. Jig fishing today, right?
Today we are talking everything jigs. One of my favorite ways to fish, and so we're going to cover. I mean, literally just about everything.
One of the ways I don't think I've ever caught a fish with a jig.
Really?
I just
Oh, wow. I can't believe that.
I'm not a jig guy.
Well, here's the thing. You know, I struggled when I got into fishing with jigs, and for whatever reason, I had this whole mental block about a jig. It's like I don't know how to throw it. When do I throw it? How do I throw it? How do I move it? What weight? What? Because there is a lot of different variations of a jig. Parentheses jig. What is it? Just so if we could make sure that everybody's on the same page. When we're talking about a jig, that's going to be a hook with molded lead on the front of it and a skirt of a lot of different materials. But that's what we're going to talk about today.
And a lot of times a weed guard, I guess. So that.
Yes. So typically a weed guard. Not all jigs have a weed guard, but primarily when you think jig, you think weed guard. I fell in love with jug fishing. I love to go jug fishing. This is now a catfish show. We just shifted gears that fast.
Hey, I got a video on our YouTube page that shows you how to jug fish.
Well,
go check it out.
We're gonna need to get that going because apparently I love to jug fish. Not much a jig fisherman, but anyway, give me a jug and I'll make. All right, we're gonna get off that. So, jig fishing. What's with the I, not a U? I didn't know how to do it. So I spent a lot of time researching it, and there is a ton of information out there about how to jig fish. And what really got me turned on to was the fact that it doesn't matter what time of year, doesn't matter what lake that you're on, doesn't matter if it's water and there's a bass in it, there is a jig that will work in that scenario. What really helped me get over the hump with it is that I actually caught my personal best bass on a jig, and she is on my wall. And I caught it.
How'd you hold her down? Just flopping on the wall?
Yeah, well, nails, some super glue. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Gorilla Tape is fantastic.
Right.
She's a little uncomfortable, but she's up there.
Beautiful mount.
Beautiful. A lot of black tape all over her. But I caught it on a jig, and so once that happened, I really fell in love with it. I actually caught it on a 1/8 ounce Bitsy bug. By Strike King. It's really this is the smallest jig at the time. This has been, 8-9 years ago. And we're just kind of messing around in the pond and wound up catching 11.3.
Wow.
And ever since then, I've had as you can imagine, an affiliation. That's not the right word I'm
You've
looking
had the
for.
bug.
An affinity? maybe?
Affinity, there's the word.
There you
Thank
go.
God for Mr. Don coming up, bringing up my misplacing of words. But the great thing about jigs is you can fish them anywhere, anytime, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be really, really simple. And we'll start with this. From a color selection, and there is every color under the sun in jigs, but green pumpkin, a black and blue, or a dark color. I like black and blue. And then from there, all you really need is a white. And that covers the full gamut. Green pumpkin, black and blue will be your bottom type baits. Your bottom hopping baits is what they're called. And then white is going to be in your swim jigs. And it really can be that simple. Now, we're going to get into a little bit more of the weeds, but if you're just getting into it, stick with those colors. If it's going to be on the bottom, think natural. If you're going to be swimming a jig, think, again, what you're trying to mimic. In most of the cases, you're going to be trying to mimic a shad or something along those lines where white will do a really good job. We're going to talk about heads. We're going to talk about weights. We're going to talk about skirting materials. We're going to talk about weed guards, and we're going to talk about jig trailers. It's a lot to get through in a short amount of time, but we're going to get through it. So we're going to start really with probably the most popular jig, and that's called a football head jig. And
Looks like a football.
real ingenious name we got. They made it real complicated, folks. But it's exactly. I mean, the head is shaped exactly like a football. The reason why it's shaped that way is the main reason where you would use a football jig is going to be on a hard bottom, a rock. It's going to be anywhere that there's an area, where there is an opportunity for a jig head to get stuck into something. So what a football head does, you got to remember this is typically a bottom dragging or bottom hopping.
Bottle hopping.
Bottle hopping. We like to throw you across bottles, Coke bottles typically. Bottom hopping bait. And so as you're dragging that football head, because it's oblong, what it does is it won't jam or cram into rocks, such as maybe a more pointed head jig.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And so you got that width. And by having that, and the shape of it has a tendency to hit, roll over, and pop loose. So if you're dragging a jig on probably one of the best jig fishing lakes literally in the country is in our state. Dale Hollow is known to be a jig fishing lake. People come from all across the country and literally the world to throw a football head jig on Dale Hollow. Not Old Hickory, I can tell you that. Dale Hollow. And it's fantastic. It's a wonderful bite. We actually did a show this winter and with myself and Mr. Harmon here and caught some on the jig on Dale Hollow.
Yeah, you did.
That football head jig is perfect for that. Weight, we'll hit that real fast. Typically, you're going to be in that 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce if you're in a football head jig. So if you're going to be the way I like to, it's pretty simple. I have this great mathematical skill. It's completely not true.
Looking forward to that.
Between 6 foot and roughly 16 foot, I'm going to throw a half ounce. Falls a little faster than 6 foot. It's a little bit slower in the 16 foot, but it's a really good all around. You can throw a 3/4 and be fine. It's just that 3/4 is going to be really big and really heavy if you're throwing it up shallower. If the fish are in that 6 to 10 foot range. What I'll do from 16 to roughly give or take 25 or 30. Del Hollow, sometimes you're 35, 38 foot throwing a jig, which is very few places in the country that you're going to do that. I mean, typically you're in that 15 to 25 to 28 foot. That's really the range that you stay in, and that's going to be a 3/4 ounce. You can go up to a 1 ounce. A 1 ounce is just, after 3, 4, 5 hours of throwing that thing all day, you would be surprised what a 1/4 ounce difference will make. And the availability of a 3/4 ounce jig compared to a 1 ounce is much higher. They're much more popular. So Kentucky Lake, fantastic out on the ledges. Old Hickory, they work really good if you want to go flipping. The only time, that's a great point to make that I didn't tell you about, 3/8. If I'm flipping a jig, what I mean by flipping is I'm just making short little pitches out to a specific target, to a stump, to a tree, something like that. I'll drop down to maybe a 3/8 on a jig. I still personally kind of like the half ounce. I feel like I can get better distance. And just that motion and flow. The only problem with that is sometimes if they're biting it out in the fall and they're in roughly, if you're throwing in 4 foot of water and they're suspended that 2.5 foot or so, or maybe 3 foot, it's like a foot off the bottom. A lighter jig, again, it's going to flow. I'm scared they're going to fall slower, and that rate of fall, sometimes they want to drop it right in front of their face and they'll just snap out and grab it. Sometimes they want that slow rate of fall, and so do a 3/8 ounce jig in that scenario. So my recommendation is if you got a boat and you got a couple rod and reels, if you go out flipping, have one with a 3/8 tied on, one with a half ounce. Go back and forth during the day, see which one gets a bit more, and then stick with that. Again, it's not rocket science, but it works.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about football jigs. We talked about sizes. The other one is called the Arky, or sometimes it's called the banana jig, sometimes it's called the bass jig. And really what they're talking about is the head shape. That's really when you talk about different jigs, all you're really talking about is the shape of the head, because a weed guard typically and a skirt is pretty much standard on all jigs. So this is called an Arky jig.
Kind of flat-headed.
It is, and so I'm trying to hold this skirt so you can see it. So when it lands, I got one hanging out. Hang on. Maybe. Todd, come help me. So there we go. And so when it sits on the ground, you throw this in your backyard to catch a big. At the bottom of the lake, it's going to sit flat. And so what that does is, and we'll talk about trailers here in a second, but again, it positions that hook at an angle and also puts your trailer sticking at more of an upright position.
Gotcha.
So typically, if you see a crawfish and a bass is about to eat it, it's got its pinchers up and it's in that defensive position, trying to protect itself. Well, when you have a jig with that type of an angle, it causes the jig to look very much like that defensive position on a crawfish. And again, we're going to talk trailers, and so you got 2 little pinchers off the back. That's what makes an Arky jig really good. Sometimes called a bass head jig, but it's really that basic shape, and it just positions the hook and the trailer off of the bottom. Instead of sitting there, it gets it elevated, and it makes that crawfish that's in that protected position.
Do you only put a crawfish trailer on that, or could you put something else?
No. You can put a lot of things on it.
All right, here we go.
You're getting ahead of me, but
sorry.
No, it's for whatever reason, in bass fishermen's head, it's always been, hey, I'm trying to imitate a crawfish, so I got to put a crawl type, something with pinchers or something with, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
Again, before we get there, let me hit one more thing about, because it's a good way to, when you got that on there, what you want to do is you want to, in essence, I call it activate the jig. It's not really the term, but it's what I think about is I want this skirt to flare. Right, so why you put silicone on the actual jig head is you want that flare of that silicone. Sometimes it's living rubber. Sometimes it's mylar. There's all kinds of different materials. This jig in itself happens to be silicone. And so what you do is when you've got it on the bottom, you want to pop it, or you want to create some type of slack in your line so this will either hop, and more importantly is this, again, this is all in the water, all this is going to flare out and come back. So think about a crawfish when he goes to move, right? You got his 2 pinches out the back, and he has typically, I think it's 3 legs on each side, maybe 4. Let's go with 3 because this is my show and this is what I'm saying it is.
Oh, now.
All right, I make Jason Harmon's show, my segment of the show. I'm going to say they got 3 on each side.
Okay, I'll go with it.
You good with that?
Yeah, sure.
All right, that passes the test. But when they go, they have that movement of they get bigger, right? So their legs come out, and then they will go and they will pop that tail, and it'll kind of shoot them forward. And so when you activate, again, I call it activate the jig, you're popping that and you're making that skirt flare, which, again, resembles a crawfish. And again, that's what we're trying to imitate the actual bait that they're doing. So just pop it. A lot of times you'll see, if you ever watch them TV shows or YouTube, they'll kind of pop it off the bottom, and then you'll see them kind of do a couple little short hops. All they're doing is they're making that skirt flare. So in your mind, when you're working that jig, think about the actions that you're doing and making up here, what is my jig doing underneath the water? And again, you're trying to make it flare, and you're trying to make those the crawls move around and look like a crawfish. So we're moving on. We talked about football heads. We talked about arky heads, and this is going to be a swim jig.
The white you liked.
The white. White is great. This one actually has a little bit of gray in it. Tennessee, you can do a little bit of green. It matches up very well. But all you're doing with this is it's the same concept of a swim bait or a crankbait. All you're doing is you're going to give it that swimming action. But what's great about a swim jig is you can throw in a lot of places you can't throw other baits. Old Hickory, for example, has a lot of bank grass, river grass, and a fantastic bite, especially when the shad spawn's going on, which it's going on this time of year, is that you got all this shad that's spawning, and they spawn up on the edges of those grass, that bank grass. Take a swim jig, throw up there, and swim it through. And again, it's got the weed guard, so it's coming through and just bouncing around and moving around all those different weeds. It's great around if you're in the back of pockets that have a bunch of trees that's been cut down, so a stump field. And swim jigs are killer because you get all the action, and you get that same move, that swimming movement, but you've got the weedless version or the weedless action of a swim jig, and that's what really makes them shine.
This sounds like my kind of bait. If I need to throw a jig, that's more of a throw it out and crank it, keep it swimming, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, it's literally the same as a crankbait. It's just a completely different action, but more importantly, you're dealing with one big hook, so much more weedless. You're not worried about getting hung up on grass and stumps and things.
Yeah,
it's really the kind of the 4-wheel drive version of a crankbait.
I like 4-wheel drives.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? I love 4-wheel drive. So let's figure out how we do that in bass fishing.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
swim jig. This is the white version. When the bluegill are on bed, get a bluegill color. I think I've got one here. Well, this has kind of got a little bit of red in it, but you can get darker colors, green pumpkins, something with some orange in it, something with some yellow in it. Blue, just again, if you're trying to match that bluegill bite. One little tip when you're working a swim jig, and we'll get in trailers here in a second, but if you're going through let's just say the bank grass, when you're reeling it, don't just take it and reel it straight, right? Because again, it doesn't have any built-in action like a crankbait, right? A crankbait's got a bill and it's got built-in roll and built-in wobble. It's just the way the bait is made. If you take a swim jig and throw it out and reel it in, it's going to go straight out, straight back to you, which is fine. But in most cases, you're going to be the one that imparts the action
and the
into
skirt's
the bait.
just going to stream along behind.
You got
not
it.
Much action.
That's exactly right, Mr. Dodd. So when you're reeling it, if you can, I like to personally raise my rod tip up and just slow as I'm reeling, just keep popping it. And what I'm doing, as we talked about earlier, I'm flaring that skirt, giving it more movement. Some guys like to put it down by the side, and they'll just pop it that way. But again, you have to impart that action, and when you do, you want that flaring action as well. So let's talk about trailers.
Okay.
We good on time?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. We're going to talk trailers. So while we're talking swim jig, let's go ahead and talk about trailers for that. This is the Missile Bait Shockwave, and it's just a soft plastic swim bait. So it's got the paddle tail. Y'all can see that or not. One trick that you can do with it, personally, I like to rig it upside down. Now this is gonna
getting
fall.
crazy. Getting
Here we
crazy,
go.
guys.
So typically they have this little roll behind it. Well, when you flip it this way, all it does is it makes it point down a little bit more, and so you get a little bit higher wobble.
Okay.
Again, fishermen, they love to tinker. If you're not tinkering, then you're not trying hard enough. I like to take it, flip it upside down. Makes me feel like I'm doing something different. But if you watch it through the water, it does give a little bit different action. But on a swim jig, a soft swim bait. Now, another trick that you can do, let me find it. This is a Zoom D-bomb, which is typically a crawl type bait. What you can do with those type baits, so typically you'll rig this where the
It looks like a crawfish a little bit.
yeah, it's got the pinchers, and so typically when you would put this on a jig, all right, you're gonna have the pinchers just in the normal natural position, right? They're gonna be on the back and they're gonna spread out. Well, you can take one of these, put it on a swim jig, and rig it sideways, and so now instead of them being out to the side, they're actually going to be in line, and they're going to flap almost like a tail. Of course, you probably won't use green pumpkin. You'll usually typically a white or something, a more shad type color. But you can take another great bait to use to do that is the Strike King Rage Crawl. Rage Crawl's got a bunch of action in its flappers. Crawls, I call them flappers. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Technical term. Instead of rigging it sideways, flip that on its edge, and now you have that inline swimming action.
Okay.
Super great. Not a lot of guys doing it. Again, you're giving the bass something a little bit different to look at.
There's an inside tip right there.
There you go.
Another one. Man, you're giving them all away.
Well, what good are you if you're not teaching somebody, right? I've got like 9 of them, so I can get 9 shows of tips, and then Todd's going to have to come out here and start helping me out because I don't know what I'm doing. We talked about swim jigs. The only difference is sometimes if you're in a lake when it's earlier and the shad are still real small, just downsize, right?
Okay.
You don't want some big, massive, 6-7 inch long bait coming through when all the bait that their bass are eating are 3.5 inches.
Yeah.
So, downsize, have you a couple tied on, like we talked about before. Have a couple tied on, throw them around.
It
see
won't
which one's
kill you.
working.
A little lighter.
Yeah, I mean, you will be very thankful, especially if you got a long day of fishing and you can catch them on a 3/8 opposed to a ½ ounce.
Yeah.
Your body will thank you later. We're going to talk about on the back. Typically on jigs, everybody thinks crawl, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That's the absolute gold standard. You want the jig, you want the crawfish profile, and you want the pinchers out the back. Pretty standard. We talked about it. The Missile D-bomb is a great one. The Strike King Rage Bug is another great opportunity. And when you're putting these on, when you put them on the bait, if it just looks too long, all you got to do is just take that soft plastic off, and you can take scissors and just trim it. I like to just take it and put it in my mouth and bite it off and spit it in the floor, and you just compact it. So don't be afraid to downsize or shrink up your piece of plastic that you're putting on there, and just make it look as natural as you possibly can. If you look at it and that trailer or that jig trailer sticking way out the back of the jig and it just doesn't look right,
Yeah.
take it off. Cut out a couple ribs like this one specifically has ribs.
Yeah.
When I throw a Rage Bug, I cut 3 ribs off. It's just how I remember it. So same thing with the
Missile. Yep.
missile baits. I take about 1/4 inch off. So
Okay.
another little tip. Now, to go back to what Jason mentioned earlier.
All right.
No, you absolutely do not have to put a crawl trailer on a jig. In most cases, it will serve you very well to not put a crawl trailer on it, because the 800 boats that's been out there on that spot before you today is throwing a jig. Most likely it's going to have a crawl trailer on it. So it gives something different, another profile.
New presentation.
It's exactly right. So it's hard to find. By the way, if you're into it at all, if you've got the time or the wherewithal, I pour 99% of the jigs that I throw. So this is a great unsolicited plug for Do It molds. Do It's kind of the standard in the business. You can get melting pots. You can get all the molds. I'm not sponsored by them. I pay retail and buy them just like everybody else
Not
that's
yet.
listening.
No.
Like, hang on. Shameless plug. But I like anything with lead. I can make them real cheap, and it's very simple. You literally can buy a melting pot and a mold. You can be there for less than $200. It's It's really not expensive, and over time, it will definitely pay for itself.
Sure. And you can make them like you want them.
You can. You can. And you know, here's a prime example. So I wanted a June bug green pumpkin. You can't find that head anywhere or that color anywhere. So I went online, bought the powder paint, and then bought the skirt and made it myself. Super simple. I've got, give or take, 80 cents, 90 cents maybe in this jig. And they're typically $4 to $5. So, again, if you got the wherewithal and you want to do it, I love to do this in the winter when the fish really aren't biting or there's really, really bad cold or I'm just tired of fishing. I'll sit in the garage on a weekend and have some buddies over, and we'll just make up hundreds of jigs, and we're set for the rest of the year. What I will tell you is if you wind up making them yourself, you will wind up fishing them a lot better because you're not nearly as scared to throw it. So if you're fishing bushes, buckbrush on Barkley, you're going to be pretty scared to go out and throw a $5 jig in the middle of a bush because you're going to hang up and break it off. Well, throwing a 95-cent jig compared to a $5 jig will make you a better fisherman because you're not scared to put it in places where most people necessarily wouldn't do it because they don't have hardly any money in it. So, again, if you got the wherewithal, I make all my jigs, shaky heads, weighted, whack, just anything with lead. I go and I invest in the mold. What's really cool is get a buddy, and you buy a mold and he'll buy a mold. Get together on a weekend and pour them up and have a lot of fun doing it. There's the time, so we got to hurry. On a jig. This is the missile quiver. Take any worm and put on a jig. Most people don't think a jig with the worm. Bass absolutely love it. Gets their attention coming across the bottom, and you've got, anywhere between a 6 to a 10-inch worm on the back of that.
Okay.
Really gets their attention from a long way off. That's really good. We talked about putting this on a swim bait. Another little tip, put it on a football jig. You're out on the ledges on Kentucky Lake, and they're hitting real big gizzard shad. Get a white jig, or just get a jig and take a can of spray paint, paint it white, and put the small one. Put a 4 or 5 inch swim bait on the back of it. It's a great tip.
Wow.
And then the other thing, far extreme, is going to the micro jig. These just came out a couple years ago on the scene, and really it's going the opposite. Opposed to getting really big on Kentucky Lake, now you can take a jig and go down to a really small weight, really small size and profile. Give them something they haven't seen before. So check them out. Come check me out, Jason Holland Fishing, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the social stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm out there trying to make it happen. So thanks to Jason and Mr. Don for having me again, as always.
You bet.
I always have a great time. So don't forget the 3 main things: your faith, your family, your fishing. So check me out. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Don.
You bet.
It's been fun. We'll do this again, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, you got to have
I don't know. I may have messed up. I said it was my show. Did you see that? Yeah, my segment of the show.
We'll talk about your contract later.
Friday to Friday contractor around here. That's all it is.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife.